Hello, hello. We're here. We're
Hello.
officially live. This tickles me. Just finished an hour ago. So, as
Same.
fresh as it can be in your mind, telling Twitter that we are live, because we are. And then there we go. So, obviously, everyone knows Kelly from the Velvet Library, and you know who I am because this is my channel. And we're going to be talking about the Familiars. Very jealous, though, that you have an ARC version of that, as opposed to I mean, all the thing that's missing is the title. It's other than that, it looks pretty much the same, but still very exciting. What made you decide on the Familiars for the Lamentable Library?
I was looking at my shelves for things that seemed vaguely Gothic, and that was that. And I wanted to read
it. I mean, that is the upside of having your own book club, is going, I have that and I want to read it. So that is kind of how I chose the unwritten library. I'm not going to lie. I was like, I already own this and I would like to read it. So that works.
I mean, I've been super keen to read that, so I am very, very excited.
Me too. And I will drop the link in the comments later because it is available via Waypoint at a discounted thing with the book club coupon code thing that I've made, which is always good. So we'll do same as I did with my Skullduggery one. We're going to do it in 3 parts where we do non-spoilery chat, then spoilery chat, and then Q&A. So I will put the first banner up, which is the non-spoiler discussion. What rating did you give it to begin with?
I think it's a 4.
Okay.
I thought it was good. Like, objectively, I thought it was a very good book. I just don't know if I enjoyed it that much.
Interesting. So, okay, what was it about it that you thought was good that it deserves a 4?
I thought that the writing was quite good. And, well, this is the thing. I kind of feel like it was a 3.
Okay.
But I might run it through Corpal because I feel like it was a 3. But then also part of me is like, am I just being very not objective because I didn't love it? And I expected to love it. So I'm marking it down for like enjoyment's sake. But I think that objectively, like, it was well written, and I thought that the story was, I want to say good, but I thought the story was fine.
Yeah, but
so maybe it was a 3.
Yeah, for me, it was a 3.5 to 4. So I ended up giving it a 4 because I did enjoy it, and I thought, yeah, it was well written, but I don't read to go, that was well written. Like, I know I can't turn that part of my brain off that goes, oh, well, I wouldn't have done it like that. Like, I know I have that smug part of my brain that does that. But if I enjoy something, I want to rate it higher than is even, like, most of the 5s, I've given 5s. I don't know if I could justify why there are 5. I just have this instinctual, that was amazing. Now everyone else needs to read it. And I would find it very, very easy to recommend the Familiars to people, which is why for me it was more of a 4 than a 3. Am I rushing out to buy the Foundling? No. But I also wouldn't not rush out. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not, I don't know, I'm in that middle bracket, which is why I think 3.5 to 4 is fair. Because I think you're right. Like, there are things about it that I found really enjoyable, and it is well written. But I'd be very interested to know, and maybe we'll save it for the spoilery bit. Like, what it was that kind of made you go, it's not quite, like, it didn't, I needed this. Or if it's just a case of you went in highly anticipating it, and therefore it was just didn't meet the mark. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that was probably a lot of it. And honestly, I got a little bored. Like,
oh no.
I mean, I don't mind slow books, but I think because generally if I read a slow book, it's fantasy. There's like a lot of world building takes place, and then that kind of, it doesn't matter that things aren't happening because things are happening in my brain.
Yeah.
But because this was just historical, like I didn't need the world filled in for me like that. So when things weren't happening, I was just like, okay, nothing's happening.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think for me, I didn't mind it because I don't know, I'm really temperamental with the pace of books anyway, because I always say that I hate slow-paced books, and then some of my favorite reads so far this year have been books where the pace is so slow. Like Catherine House, for example, is the book that I'm currently reading, and I'm obsessed with, but nothing happens, and it is all just like this really slow, drawn out nothing, and I love that. So I know that I'm probably being a massive hypocrite by saying that the pacing didn't bother me, because I know that pacing has bothered me in other books. I didn't get bored of it. It wasn't, but then I also did it as an audiobook alongside. So I went through it quite quickly, which I think helped, because I don't think I noticed lagging in the middle, because I kind of just did it. And also, I did it for Mystery Inkathon as well. So I knew I was going to get it done in a weekend. So I think that also helped stop it from feeling really slow. But I can see what you're saying about that, because I think, yeah, it's not quite a mystery. There's mystery elements to it, but because it has that, I think it slows it down, because the author is almost like waiting for you to realize that this scene is really important for like either world building or working out the mystery to stuff, without actually giving you, here's what it is. Like, it's all quite ambiguous. So I can see that. I can definitely see that. But yeah.
I just I just thought of something I wanted to say and now I can't remember at all. Um,
It will come to you. It will come to you.
it was related to what you were saying.
Was it about pace, or why you found it boring, or the mystery element?
Oh, it was I think the other problem was that, so I mostly read it across yesterday and today. I started it like a week ago, read the first maybe 100 pages, and then the last like 300 pages I've read in the last 48 hours. And I think for me that made it worse. I think that if I'd paced myself with it, and if I'd read chunks of it at a time, it probably I wouldn't have got bored with it in parts. But I think because I had long stretches of nothing happening and I was reading that all in one stretch, it took its toll.
Yeah, that's fair.
So entirely my fault for procrastinating it.
Thing is, it's so easy to do, I think, especially because like with a book, especially for like a book club pick or like a read along one where you're obligated to read it, that is the quickest way for me to just not pick something up, is to be like, well, I have to read this, so therefore I want to read everything else that's on my shelves, you know. So that's fair, that's valid, I think.
I mean, that was me throughout my entire English degree. I was just like, I don't care that this book sounds great. You've told me I have to read it, so now it's not going to happen.
Yeah, now I don't want to. Yeah, absolutely. Although I'm literally wearing my uni jumper right now, just to be like.
Oh no, I'm not wearing a university thing.
You're like, I'm not.
Well, I'm wearing a Crescent City shirt, but I always think that it says Crescent City University, but it doesn't. It just says Crescent City.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. That's cool though. I like that you're representing Sarah J. Maas whilst we're here. That's great. Keeping on brand.
I can't turn it off.
I wouldn't ask you to. I would never ask you to. Did you have a favourite character or a least favourite character?
My favourite character was probably Puck. The only being that didn't annoy me. And actually, I mean, I hated her mother, but at least she was like interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I quite enjoyed reading the scenes with her.
Yeah, I felt like she, as a character, was probably one of the most well formed, because even if you didn't understand her motivations, you understood that she did. And then, like, it was a far more like What I found with a lot of the characters is it was very superficial. Alice is very kind of conflicted. Fleetwood is very confused. Roger is very ambitious. Like it's all like at one level. Whereas with Mary, there are complications there because she is ambitious for her daughter and she feels guilty for other stuff that I'm not going to mention until like the spoilery bit. And like she's carrying all this other stuff that I think makes her, out of all of them, the most human. Like she was the one that I believed the most out of the characters, which was very interesting. But yes, Puck was. I mean, dogs always are. Dogs are always the best. So yeah, love that for him. One of the go on. What were you say?
Oh, I was just going to say, was there anyone else that you like particularly cared about?
I don't know if like cared about is the right word. There were characters that I found less frustrating than others. Like I can't remember the name of her friend slash neighbor, but Roger's wife. I mean,
Catherine.
yeah, didn't like her. Found her really frustrating. Janet was fascinating because to see such an ambitious and manipulative, whilst also being manipulated child, was really interesting. And yeah, Ali has just said the same, that Janet was her favorite. Or like, yeah, I think that's valid because I think there was a lot going on there. And again, she was a child. Like to have that kind of power, and it's based on a real thing because they would have just picked people to pick and choose who were witches and who weren't. To have that kind of power that you're literally sending your entire family to the gallows so that you can stay in a nice house. Do you know what I mean? And when Janet comes and like wanders around the house and is like, oh well, it's much nicer than Roger's house is or whatever. Like, can I come and stay here? Like, it's just like, wow, you're a sociopath. You know, like it's just that was interesting. But I wouldn't say she was my favorite. She was just strange. But yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to add in a non-spoilery bit before we start talking spoilers?
I don't think so.
Then let's just crack on because I want to talk spoilers because there's so many things that I just think is just so fascinating, just in general about like the world that's built and the kind of the history of it and stuff like that. But I want to talk like specifics to the book. So there are some questions at the back of my copy that are for like the reading group ones. So I might start with that. Because there was one in particular that was related to Janet that I thought was really interesting. So, where is it? Okay, so Fleetwood did not tell anybody about the abuse she suffered as a child because she feared no one would believe her. Yet she mistrusts Janet, who is a child herself. Do you think she should have had more sympathy with Janet? See, I'd say no, because I think that it's a
Yeah.
very different set of abuse. And I think their
Yeah.
response to it is very different, if that makes sense. Because I feel like with Fleetwood, it was a manipulative man who was opportunistic and calculated. And obviously, any kind of like abuse tied to like child abuse and sexual abuse, I think it's always going to be a trigger for me anyway. Whereas with Janet, yes, she's living in squalor. She's not being abused by that family though. Like it's not abuse in the same way, but she is being manipulated by being given a better life to then hand in her family. But that is also abusive because there are going to be repercussions for that when she's older. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're an adult and you think, oh yeah, I sent my entire family away. Because once the court case is over, like I think Fleetwood says it in like part 4, like once the court case is over, what is Janet going to do? Like, where's she going to go? They're not going to keep her. She's not their pet. They're just going to send her back. So she's not going to have any friends, any family, and nowhere to go, which as a woman is really dangerous. But as a child, you just don't have any concept of that. So I thought
Yeah.
that was.
I mean, I feel like I can't really add anything.
Yeah, I do that. I talk a lot, and then people just go, "You covered all of it there, that Hannah. You've said a lot." So yeah, and I think that's. I just think it's fascinating. For me, I love stories about witches in general because I find that era of history really interesting, brutal, and like unfathomable in that we can turn against people so quickly, but really fascinating that they can tie it to so many different things. Do you know what I mean? Like that, like there's like religious passages and stuff like that in like on each part they've got like religious quotes and things
Mm.
like that, which I find really fascinating. And just yeah, I don't know. I just find it really interesting, especially because like I think in fantasy witches can go either way. They're either obviously witches or they're obviously not. Whereas this one tries so hard to make it ambiguous, and then at the end just goes, "Yeah, by the way, witches aren't real. If this is historical fiction, not historical fantasy, witches aren't real," kind of thing. Um, what did you think of the ending, by the way, and the way that she finds out about the like note and stuff?
I felt like the ending was very rushed, especially because it was such a slow paced book. Then so much happened in those last two chapters.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know, everything just felt very, it felt like it was tied up very neatly, apart from the fact that, you know, Alice leaves and she doesn't know what's happened to her. Like, it all just felt very perfect. Like, it turns out that, you know, Richard didn't care more about having a child than about her life. And, like, oh, okay, you know, he's got a mistress and a child somewhere, but, like, that's fine. And there was another thing that I was, oh, and I mean, I thought that the situation with her mother, I thought that that was done well, but also it was just another thing that was like, oh, this is like very convenient that actually your mother's not a terrible person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, there was
it
a
all
lot
just
of
felt a
that.
bit too perfect.
Yeah, and did you find that it felt a bit cold because it was so perfect? Like the way he's just like, "Oh no, it's not you that will die, it's her. So she won't be a problem for very long anyway." And I was just like, "Okay, you've got two potential kids with two potential women, but it's fine because the woman will probably die and not have a child." Because this was about her the whole time, not your wife. So your wife just has to wait out the situation. Do you know what I mean? Like I just found that really cold, but then like Richard is really cold like the whole way through. Like he doesn't have a conversation with her about it. He keeps her in the dark, so she's perpetually like second guessing everything he says and does and like stuff like that. And just when he turns up at her house and it's just like, "You're coming home." Like you don't have a choice, you're coming home. I understand that's very much like what men would have been like. Um, but it meant that he kind of flipped between being this hero husband that she idolized sometimes and this tyrant who was controlling her sometimes. And it just felt like he would just turn on like flick a switch. Which emotion are we supposed to feel for him? Um, and yeah, I just thought that whole thing, like with the thing at the end, it was very convenient that it was like, "Oh, it was all a misunderstanding." Like, I just found that. Do you know what I mean? Like, just really
Yeah.
convenient. Um, so Ali has said, "Yeah, I felt kind of weird about the ending since Fleetwood was just kind of like lost some of her need to know and wildness. Like having a kid changes you." Well, Ali would know that that is not the case. But I think you're right because the whole time Fleetwood is really adventurous and is going out and exploring all this stuff. Like I found that really fascinating that so many people are just like, "Oh, you're still doing that? Like you're still going riding and you're still doing all this?" And I liked that she had that rebellious streak, but she was also very wary that she couldn't push it too far because then she would lose her social standing and she would lose the comfort of her home and stuff like that. She left her husband, but she went to her mum's as opposed to like fretting that she was completely by herself. That felt really convenient as well. Um, but yeah, no, it's like, yeah, Alice is gone. Okay, cool. This woman who has basically emotionally supported me for 500 pages, don't worry about it. She's fine. She's just She's just gone somewhere, you know?
Yeah. I saw a fox, so
Hash.
I know that she's fine.
Oh, yeah. Sarah Fox, so yeah. I mean, that is one of the other questions is about the familiar spirits. Um, so I think I read this one to you earlier. So the familiar spirits in the book are ambiguous. Do you believe they played a real part in the story, or were they just imaginings of and suspicion? Because obviously she keeps seeing foxes everywhere, and she starts to like see a fox and believe that that is Alice. But the whole point is it's like, oh well, you can believe that, but witches still aren't real, kind of thing. So, what did you think of the use of familiars in the story?
I mean, I kept wanting to believe that they were real because I I think my only problem with witch trial books is that I'm like, I know that they're not real witches and that this is, just what happened and that normal women were persecuted for something that they weren't doing.
Mm.
But like, I always want them to be witches. So like, I wanted the familiars to be real, but I was also just like, it's probably just she has a dog that runs away when other people are nearby.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's the thing, and I think it's yeah. You're right. When you want something, you're not going to suspend your disbelief past what your expectations are. So, like, if you're going into this being like, okay, this is going to be a straight historical fiction, you might question whether they are, but you're always going to be like, okay, but it's historical, so it probably isn't. Whereas I feel like if there had been other elements of this that had felt slightly more gothic and slightly more mysterious, like so when I studied at uni, one of the things that came up quite a lot is in gothic fiction, there will be like random music that characters can hear that doesn't seem to come from anywhere, or they will see random lights or things like that. And I feel like if the familiars had been part of a collection of things that were mystical or magical or related, I could believe they were familiars more rather than just coincidences, considering she lives in the forest basically. Like they live in the middle of nowhere, they're surrounded by land. So why wouldn't you see foxes? Do you know what I mean? Like I live in a town and I see foxes, so they would have absolutely have had foxes and things around. It made it difficult for me to like suspend it, if that makes sense, because I'm just my brain is too busy going, oh, but obviously here's the actual solution for that. Whereas if there have been other things, and I appreciate that there's obviously the side quest of working out if witches are real with the other girl who starts the whole thing by cursing someone, and then the guy has a stroke, and you can't work out
Yeah,
was it a stroke or was he cursed, kind of thing. I found that really interesting, but again, it wasn't enough. The whole suspicion thing, it wasn't carried into, which is fine because I think the purpose of the story was to show that whilst women are being persecuted, they will still find familiarity and kind of like bridge those bonds together. It just so happened that it was around witches, but I wish they'd kind of like it would have been a higher 4/5 if they had really gone for the witchy stuff. Do you know what I mean? Because even the witch trials are barely like developed. They go to prison and then they just sit there until they pass away, and then they go, and it's all like done at the end in that very convenient ending that you mentioned, where it's like, oh yeah, and Alice made it out, none of the others did, and you're just like, cool. Like the blurb literally tells me that this is going to be about the witch trials, and it isn't, because it does. You never really see any of that.
yeah.
Would you have preferred if they had gone into the witch trials like fully?
I think so because I like one. That's what I was expecting, and also I think I would have been interested in finding out more about why they thought all of these women were witches. Like it was all just kicked off by one thing, and then like, oh, she knows all these people. All of these people are with her. They must all be witches. Like
Yeah,
I wanted more than that.
yeah,
You
yeah,
just killed 10 people, and like because they were friends, because
yeah,
a little girl told you that they were all together on a day that a thing happened.
yeah.
Like,
And she can't even be trusted because she wasn't there. Yeah. There's a lot. I feel like when we were saying earlier that it's really well written, I think one thing that I'm thinking about it now in like retrospect is it must be quite well written for me to not question it as much as I'm reading it as I am now after the fact. Because I feel like the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, oh wait, I have an issue with this, and this, as opposed to when I was reading it, when I was just like, oh, this is like an interesting mystery. Like, and I quite like murder mysteries and things like that that aren't your standard gritty, he's an angry detective who's also divorced and has an alcohol problem, but he will find your child, kind of like those mysteries bore me. But like anything that's like a little bit different, I'm fine with. So I feel like I enjoyed the mystery element of it. And I like the fact that Fleetwood isn't a reluctant detective. Like, she's not actively avoiding it. She wants to know more. So therefore, like, you're carried along with her on that. But that's not why I expected this book to be. Like, I didn't expect it to be a mystery. I expected it to be a historical look at witches. So that was, yeah. I guess if you're going in with that kind of expectation, it didn't hit the mark, and therefore I'm annoyed at it now. You know?
Yeah, I feel like the more we're discussing it, the more I'm like, yeah, it was definitely a 3 and not a 4.
Yeah. Which is not what you'd expect. Like, usually I'm like, oh, I think it was a 3 or I think it was a 4, and then either I start defending it and I'm like, oh no, it's definitely a 5. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's great. Whereas I'm like, no, I don't even want to defend it. The more we talk about it, the more I'm like, oh, that's not it's not ideal. Do you know what I mean? So Ali has said, I had no idea what this book was going in, so I think it's why I enjoyed it more, because I didn't even really know if it was supposed to be about witches. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think it's interesting to go back to the familiar question, the fact that it's called The Familiars, considering there are no familiars. Like, there's a dog and there's a fox that she sees occasionally, but there's no, like, I don't know. I just thinking about it now, I'm like, is she implying that Alice is her familiar? That they're like, but then surely they'd be a coven. I don't understand. I'm now even questioning where the title came from. You know. But I did enjoy it, but I'm nitpicking now, and it's making me angry. Okay, we'll move on to another question before I go on another tirade, and I will let you answer first before I then just rant for 20 minutes, apparently, because that's my jam. So the next one is, women were disproportionately targeted as part of the witch hunts of the period. Why do you think that was, Kelly?
Because we live in an inherently misogynistic society.
Yeah.
And it's just, the further back you go in history, the worse it gets.
Mm-hmm. Although you do reach a certain point where it kind of goes the other way, because when, like, the Vikings weren't misogynists, they believed that maths was magic, and therefore only women were allowed to carry money because they only trusted women with magic.
I mean,
so
fair.
I don't know what happened. The Vikings left and our world went to pot, honestly. But yeah,
in so many ways.
In so many ways. Well, yeah, like, it used to be a case of, women could divorce their husbands for the smallest reason, and they just had to like tell everyone, "Oh, I've divorced him," and then they were divorced. And if anyone attacked a woman, she was allowed to cut off his hand and wear it around her neck as a sign that he had attacked her, and that she wasn't going to take it. So I think, yeah, valid. But yeah, and I think you're right. Misogyny is the answer. Misogyny and patriarchy is the answer, as it so often is. Yeah, okay. I'll ask another question.
Just what you said about divorce. I would have also been interested to, if her mum had gone into a bit more detail about the annulment, because, like, an annulment's not a small thing. Like, you have to have grounds for it. And okay, so she was a tiny child, and, like, one of the grounds for annulment can be that you haven't consummated the marriage. Fine. So they probably use that. But, like, I would have been interested to know more about how that had gone down in the 1700s.
Yeah, especially considering one of the reasons Fleetwood sees Richard as her hero is because he saved her from this marriage. And that is like straight from the beginning. She talks about how he saved her from this awful marriage, and he's the best husband she could have asked for because he literally was better than the last husband she had. And yet everything to do with what he did is so vague. Like, it's so kind of like, just accept that he is the hero of this and that he saved her for these reasons doing this thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know. For me, it was just another convenience. We can feel sorry for Fleetwood because she had this thing happen to her, and we can like Richard again because, regardless of the fact he's been a terrible husband, he wasn't as terrible as this guy. Which I think is how misogyny and patriarchy works anyway. It's just like, yes, he might be bad. This guy's worse, though. So.
There's a moment in Brooklyn Nine-Nine where they're interviewing someone and he goes, oh yeah, he wasn't a bad guy. He's never even hired a prostitute. And Jake's like, is this the bare minimum? Like, is this the bar for being a good person?
I think there's a bit where, like, he's interviewing this guy who's like a complete sleazeball, and he a bar opposite a yoga room, basically just perving on women. And Jake says something along the lines of, well, I guess it's better than murder. Like, it's just trying to like rationalize, oh, that really is awful, but at least it's not as awful as that,
Like, he didn't assault you, so he's a good guy.
It's the least we can expect. Yay! He never hit her. I guess that's something. Yay! Like,
no. But then I feel like Richard was almost a missed opportunity because I feel like they could have really leaned into his bad parts in the bad moments. But even though, like you were saying, we were supposed to seemingly supposed to flip flop between liking him and hating him, even in the moments where we were supposed to hate him, I was like, okay, I do hate him. I've hated him from the beginning. But like, I didn't. That also felt very superficial. Like, I hated him on an intellectual level, but I didn't feel anything. And I feel like it would have been so much more interesting if she'd really like leaned into the bad parts of him, and he could have been a really interesting character, but instead he was just kind of there.
I think it would have been really interesting because, like, some books will do it where they'll give you a second perspective so that you can empathize with them. I'd have liked it if Stacey Halls had given us Richard's perspective so that we actively didn't. Like, if we could see him engaging with Roger and the other guys looking for witches, actively looking for witches, and rationalizing that by doing this and tormenting these women, he is going to solidify his place as the next sheriff or whatever it was he was going for. That would have been really interesting because we understand that at the end that he was just doing a job and he has his ambitions and stuff like that, but actually seeing him go through those steps would have been a lot more interesting to me than just being told about them afterwards. And Ali's put like a really good point of like, it would be interesting to have the two timelines so that we can see how the mother reacted to the first marriage. I think it would have been really cool to have like a second perspective of like, especially because he will not view himself as a bad guy, right? So like, he's not going into this going, I'm a terrible person for like putting all these women to death. Like, he's never going to view himself in that way. He might not even be conflicted about it. It would be really fascinating to see him justifying it to an audience who 600 years later know how awful it is that he did this. Do you know what I mean? Like, that would have been really interesting to me, but I'm wishing for things I'm never going to get. So another question is, Alice and Fleetwood are from very different backgrounds, but their lives have many similarities. Discuss what they have in common, and is one better off than the other?
I mean, in a sense, they both have no freedom. Like, Fleetwood, although she does like go out and do things, as you were saying, she's very wary of like, what will people think of me? What are people going to say about me? Like, if my husband realizes I'm doing this, I'm going to get into trouble. So, like, although she pushes the boundaries, she has those boundaries. Whereas Alice, like, she in theory has freedom. She can go and do whatever she wants and see whatever she like, see whoever she wants. But also, like, being a woman of her status in that time with no money, like, your life's not going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
And like, you can't really do anything to make your life better. So both of them were kind of stuck in situations that just by virtue of being who they were, they would never be able to get out of.
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting that they both make interesting choices with regards to their own entanglements as well, because like obviously with Fleetwood, escaping one marriage for another was for her safety, whereas Alice actively never got married so that she could enjoy having the man that she wanted, and it was seen as like a completely normal thing that she wasn't married. Like she wasn't seen as lesser because it wasn't strange for women of that status to just live with a man and not be married. Whereas at a higher status, you have to be married because it's seen as a status symbol to be married into that. And like, you know, he's marrying her for her money or for her status or whatever it is, and she's marrying him for his money. There's a lot more like financial gain. It's a lot more ambitious as opposed to Alice, who believed she was in love with this person, and probably was in love with him before he turns into an alcoholic who couldn't look after their epileptic kid. Like it's just really interesting that she probably had a lot more freedom and flexibility, but she gave up that freedom and flexibility for a man. And as we all know, they're never worth it. So don't bother. Like, you know? So I just, yeah, I found that really interesting. But like, I think they are similar. They're not as similar as that question is implying, though, because I think Alice has a lot more, she's a lot more savvy. She's a lot more world aware. I think she's a lot more like sensible in the way that she reacts to certain things. She's a lot more cautious, as she should be, because she's in that situation where she has no authority, no power. She's just a midwife. She's just kind of trying to help this woman survive. And Fleetwood is nowhere near as independent as Alice is. Like, she's very dependent on Alice for everything, really. So, and then Richard for everything else. So, interesting. Do you think there are other characters that are more similar to Fleetwood and Alice than they are to each other?
I feel like you're going to have an answer for this, and I'm going to agree with you, but I can't think of
it. I think that Catherine, Roger's wife, and Fleetwood have more similarity, if only for status and the things they prioritize. They prioritize people they care about and their comfort over others, if that makes sense. I know that Fleetwood obviously goes out of her way to help those women, and she uses her status to help them, but I don't know if that's something she would have done if she weren't driven by the need to save Alice. Because if she didn't care about Alice, I don't think she'd have cared about any of them. And therefore, like, her and Catherine are similar in that way, because Catherine doesn't care about any of them. She cares about herself, and she cares about how dangerous it is having Janet in their house. Does that make sense? So I think those two have the most similarity out of all of them, but they're two sides of the same coin, because you see one acting and one refusing to act. But they are probably the most similar, I think. And then obviously Roger and Richard are just both awful, so they're also very similar to each other, but yeah.
And just could have been the same person, honestly. Like, I genuinely, there were scenes where the two of them were together, and I had to double check who was speaking.
Yeah. I genuinely would be interested to know if Stacey Halls originally planned for Richard to be the one to do the witch hunt, and then changed it to another character so that we still can empathise with Richard at the end. Because the sheer fact that it's not Richard who like sends them all away, but helps get Alice out, it kind of redeems him in a way that I don't think he would have been redeemed if he had been the one doing the main hunt. I mean, I don't think he
Another
redeems his behaviour anyway, but
another thing that I also just found really convenient at the end was after the witch trials, she said something about Roger, like, oh yeah, he got like the status and the money and everything that he wanted from it, and then people shunned him because they realized that he was just doing all of this for like to get the status and to get the money. And I was like, would people have cared though? Because everyone else was very happy to be persecuting these women. So like, I feel like people would have just been like, okay, cool, he was the person that instigated the witch hunt, and they wouldn't have connected that with he was doing it for this reason. And I feel like they wouldn't have been that sort of comeuppance for him.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's very much that was very much for the audience. The audience to be like, oh, good, so at least he got some kind of retribution. No, he wouldn't have. If anything, he'd have been higher in esteem than everyone else because it wasn't for another 200 years that anyone realised this was a problem. Because they continue to persecute women up and down the country for years. Like, we had hysteria in the Victorian era. Like, we have all kinds of things to do with feminism now. Like, it's still a thing. So he definitely wouldn't have. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's just another one of those things that was just so convenient. The thing is, like, it's really interesting because I think you and I read a lot of series. So a lot of series it will feel like a satisfying ending because there's this open-ended thing where there's more possibilities for the next book because they're trying to sell you the next book, right? Whereas the Familiars is a standalone. So with standalones, it's a lot more like, oh, I need to tie up everything just in case. And then sometimes authors just don't get that right. And I just think there was so much in this book that could have been left open because those people's lives aren't over. Like, there's still stuff that could have been, like, even if Fleetwood had just reflected on the fact that she's like, well, I'm never going to trust Roger and his wife ever again. Like, he's not going to stay away from them because, like, I don't want to even like run the risk of being called a witch myself or whatever. That would have made more sense to me than tying every little thing up in a little bow. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just, yeah, very convenient.
And right at the end where she torches her house, I feel like that would have had a lot more impact if it was just her going and being like, yes, this has been the source of so much misery for me, I'm going to destroy this place. But because of how it was framed, it was like, oh, the king's going to come and stay there. It's going to cost a lot to make it livable, so let's destroy it instead. And I feel like if it was just her making a decision to destroy it, it would have been so much more impactful than like giving her a reason to destroy it.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. Again, we don't see enough of her past to really understand her motive behind that. It just looks like she's like, okay, I have no fear of any repercussions. I can do what I like now because I've managed to save a witch that isn't a witch. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just felt very abrupt. But Lizzie is here, and she enjoyed it, which is great. Ali has said Alice's shift in personality and how she responds to Fleetwood in the end kind of felt abrupt to me, and I think that's really true because Alice keeps an awful lot to herself, and she's a very mysterious person, and then she just kind of I feel like a lot of it they're in tandem with each other. So one is expecting more from the other, and then at the end it kind of flips, and it's almost like, okay, cool, we don't need each other anymore. See you later. Like, I don't know. I found that really abrupt too.
Yeah. And
I think. Go on.
I think it was a comment from Ali earlier where she was like, Fleet was just like, okay, Alice is gone now. If she had that, like, if she really had that sense of, oh, I can do whatever I want with no worry about what happens to me, I feel like she would have gone looking for her. And I feel like it was kind of explained away that she'd left so that she wouldn't be hunted, but like it's not like she escaped. Like is it acquitted? I always get.
Yeah.
She was proven innocent. So, yeah. Like, she could have stayed. and things would have been fine. So I feel like Fleetwood wouldn't have just let her go off if she really still wanted her in her life.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a bit strange. I think it was almost just so they could have that moment at the end where Fleetwood sees the fox, and it's just like, ah, yes, my friend, represented by this animal that has nothing to do with her at all. It was all in my head the whole time, you know? It's just a weird little nod to it. Interesting. There are more questions, so we'll pick another one at random. Okay, so this is about Roger and his pursuit, because I think I want to rant about Roger. I've got many thoughts and many feelings, so we'll start with this one. Roger's pursuit of the Pendle Witches evolves from a display of authority to a sinister obsession, like collecting cards at a table. Do you think he truly thought them to be witches, or was something else at play?
I mean, he wanted status, he wanted money, he wanted the king's favor, and this was a convenient way to get all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and also
Yeah.
it was, I mean, witchcraft was a convenient way to explain things they didn't understand. So someone had a stroke, they obviously didn't know what that was in the 1700s. So, and he happened to encounter someone who, you know, wasn't really too high up in the town's good books. So obviously she must have cursed him. Like, it was also,
Yeah.
that was a real convenience that he could exploit to get what he wanted.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I think there's a couple of chapters like before the whole witch thing kicks off where Fleetwood basically explains to us as an audience that, oh, you know, he's close to retiring, or like he's been retired for a while, like he used to be really important, but he isn't really important anymore. And then he's given this gift of the king wants us to hunt witches. I will find him some witches, and then he will come here and we'll all be really happy together because I'll be in the king's favor again. And it's one of those things where like it is an obsession, but he so manipulates that whole thing that I think it goes further than that, because yeah, like for him to have heard about the argument in the first place, I know that it's brought to him by the guy's son, who was like, oh, you know, he told me that he was cursed by this girl. I did think the girl was a bit stupid to go back and be like, I'm sorry, I know I cursed him, but it was an accident or whatever. I just kind of swore at him or whatever. And it's like, just never return to the scene of the crime. That's what I want my audience to take away from this. Don't do it. Because then some man will make up that you're a witch, and then he will persecute you and your entire family for his own political gain. And I just think the whole time, again, patriarchy and misogyny at work.
Except for that one member of your family that you've always mistrusted because she will sell all of you out so that she can have a cushy life.
Yeah, that creepy cousin that you've got that is like half the age of everyone else but seems to be more emotionally mature than everyone you know. Yeah, beware of that one, you know? So Lizzie has said, I used to live I think that's going to be very close to where the book was set, and I love the real history of the Pendle Witch trials. Roger is an interesting character, and I feel is a true representation of how men acted. I mean, yeah, he is, and I think it's really interesting because the whole time he feels that he can boss around Fleetwood and Catherine. And with Catherine, he can. But obviously, with Fleetwood, she's not his wife. He has no authority over her whatsoever. So the pressure he puts then is on Richard, and Richard buckles to him very easily because he wants to get something out of Roger as well. So I think that in itself is really, really fascinating. But I wish we had seen more of that. Like I said, I'd have loved to have seen from their perspective during the witch trials, or like collecting their evidence and making those decisions would have been really interesting to see, because I think we also get, it's not the first time that we've had the witch trials kind of explained to us as women being persecuted against. It would have been really interesting to see the persecuting of it, if that makes sense. I don't know if I've even said that right, but how would you have felt like if this had been written by a man? Do you think you'd have had a different response to those elements, do you think?
I feel like I would have just felt really icky.
Yeah, icky.
I just when I so if everything was exactly the same, but the author was a man,
Hmm.
yeah, I when women write creepy men, I I'm like, okay, cool, men are creepy. When men write creepy men, I assume that the man writing them is creepy.
Yeah, that's valid. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think also, whenever a man writes a passive woman, I find that really suspicious as well. Because I'm just like, why? What purpose did is it a purpose for the story, or is it just that in your experience the women are passive or should be passive? Like, I don't know if it's just that I have this insidious belief in the way that that is, but I find it very suspicious. And I think there's a lot of stuff in this story that would have been really ick if it had been written by a man. Like, even just down to like the relationship and the way the medicine is dealt with and the way the pregnancy is dealt with, um would have had a very darker undertone if it had been written by a man as opposed to by a woman, which is interesting because I don't think there's many stories where you couldn't interchange it. Like, fantasy is written by men and women and can kind of come out exactly the same. Like, I don't know if men would write the way Sarah J. Maas does and like pull it off in the same way. Like, I think there's quite a feminine style to her writing. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a feminine style to Stacey Hall's writing, but I think that if it was a man, there would be like a more insidious tone to it. Maybe it would have been darker for us
Yeah.
and that I might have enjoyed it more. I don't know, but I'd felt like it would have been weird. It would have been very strange. But no, I just thought
Yeah.
I'd ask. Hmm. So you said you made some notes. Are there anything in your notes that you think
Oh,
warrants?
I mean, nothing interesting. I the first note I have is that obviously I went into it already hating Richard because I have a feeling on the back of in the synopsis on my copy it says that she finds this note that says that
Yeah.
she's going to die if she has another child. So like I already went into it hating him,
Hmm.
but then the first time he appeared on page, this is so nitpicky, but the first time he appeared on the page and I found out he had an earring, I was done. That
That's
that
amazing.
to
I love
me
it. Like,
that was like that was the end of it. I was just couldn't.
thing
Um
is, like, I heard that he had an earring, and I was like, "Is he a pirate?" Like, it was just that's where my mind went, and like, it makes sense because like he's a merchant, so he would have. They would have literally put gold wherever they could to like show it off because he'd have had a lot of money and almost no status. So I thought that was really interesting. But it is interesting that we learn about him through the note before we meet him. So it's not like we've
mm,
seen them at dinner and then she's discovered this note. And I think it also makes it far more believable when she goes through his like books later and she finds out that he's been paying for stuff at her old house. And like I found him really creepy. His little like steward manservant friend was just as creepy. Like, the idea that he was helping this man have an affair is just so weird to me. Like, I get that that's his job, but the whole thing was like, and like, he was so rude to Fleetwood as well when she was just like, "Oh, he said that I can look at that," and he's just like, "Did he?" Like, that whole thing was just really bizarre. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, especially because then it's like at the end, oh, just a casual misunderstanding. Don't need to worry about it. That thing that started off this entire plot, don't worry about it. It's nothing, you know? Like, mm, yeah.
I
And you were going to say something else? Sorry.
oh the steward I so he was super creepy and it was super weird that he was helping him have an affair, but then it was also made weirder by the fact that he then had these moments that he seemed really devoted to Fleetwood. So like he snuck her the letter, and then like when she it seemed like she was dying, like he was there and he seemed really concerned, and he just didn't feel consistent at all. So then
Mm-mm.
when he found her going through the stuff, I thought he was going to be like he was going to try to like subtly help her, but
Mm.
then as you said, he was just really rude to her.
Yeah, it was
He
just
was just
very
weird.
bizarre. And also because he would have been of lower status than her, so like he would have had no right to speak to her like that at all. Like it's not even like he'd have had the same status and therefore could talk to a woman in that way. Like she has a lot more status than him, so there's absolutely no reason for him to talk to her like that other than because he was super rude. And it wasn't even like a loyalty to his master type thing, because one, his master wasn't there, and two, he doesn't stop her from going through the folders. Like he doesn't go and like report her or anything, because she stays there for like another hour or whatever, just rummaging through his stuff. So it obviously wasn't that big a deal. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just really weird. It almost felt like, again, much like with Richard and Roger, that they wanted two characters, or to try and split the roles of two characters into one person. Because I feel like if there had been like another servant that she was close with. But like there's a moment, like this really bothered me. There was a moment when she went downstairs and she like had a go at the servants for doing something disrespectful, and then she trips over and they laugh at her. And I just think, right, you're a woman of this society. You have exactly two responsibilities: to act like a lady and to have a child. So like you are trained how to move, what to say, how to speak, as if you're going to trip over a door frame. Like, just as, like, and I appreciate that it's a really human thing to do, but if your one job is to look and sound pretty, you're not going to stack it out of a door frame. And you're certainly not going to allow your servants to talk to you in that way. Do you know what I mean? And like the fact that when she goes and eats at her mum's house, there's nicer food because her servants are literally just doing the bare minimum. That was really bizarre to me. And I don't know if it's because like I always forget that she was like 17 years old, but it would have been normal for a young mistress to still have control of her house. Like she just didn't have any control over anything they did. So like quite a few people were rude to her. That whole thing was just a thing. Do you know what I mean? But
But
yeah.
then there was another moment that she went down to the kitchens and then they were suddenly really nice to her.
Yeah. It just felt like whenever it was convenient to make them not nice, they were not nice. And then when it was convenient for them to be, do you know what I mean? Like it was, yeah. So Lizzie had a comment without about our male versus female author thing. I think it depends on the author. I think if every woman in their books acted the same, then I would feel like I would have more of an issue. I don't know if that's an interesting question. I think it is though, because I think it's really interesting, especially in this, because there are so many different types of women. You have very passive women and very assertive women. I mean, her mother, Mary, is someone who acts or doesn't act for a specific reason. So, like, she doesn't tell Fleetwood about the affair because she's protecting Fleetwood, but also because she knows how Fleetwood will react to that. Like, she's making an active decision not to share that information, but she is passive with regards to how Richard treats Fleetwood. She does nothing about that. So it's really interesting that you can have like different characters act in those different ways. I think that is more true to that. I don't know if that would have changed if it had been a man writing different characters, but I just think having that diversity of female characters is really interesting anyway. And I think this also passes the Bechdel test because I think there's quite a few moments where they don't talk about men at all. So that's something. Did you have any other notes?
Well, I had one about the writing that I thought this was on like the second or third page that I thought that the descriptions were good. And also, so she mentioned early on that she liked Richard because he didn't treat her like an infant like everyone else did. And I was like, first of all, you are a child. Like, I know that in this time it was quite normal for someone to be, because she was 17, but they'd been married for like 4 years, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So I know it was quite normal for someone to be married at like 13 or 14 and become like the lady of the house, but you are a child. And also, literally all he did was treat her like a child.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, at that point, we thought that he was still hiding the fact that she was going to die. So, like, everything that he does, like everything that he did was intentionally to like keep her safe or keep her in the dark, or like at no point did he treat her like an adult capable of making her own decisions.
No, he
And I just thought it
patronizes and
was
manipulates her.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought it was interesting that her perception of him as like being this wonderful savior completely skewed how she saw everything that he did to her,
Mm-hmm.
because she was like, oh, he's great, so everything that he does must be great,
Yeah.
when really everything that he did was the opposite of what she thought.
Yeah. It would be really interesting, I think, to read it knowing, one, that the note is not about her, and two, knowing what it was he did to her, like to save her or whatever, versus what he's actually doing to her now. Like the way he manipulates her, keeping her in the dark, insisting like the way she behaves, or like the little kind of things, like he leaves her on her own for like weeks at a time, and then is surprised that she has an emotional attachment to other people around her. Like he treats her like a child the entire time. It's so bizarre. um but thinking about like her age and stuff, in Pride and Prejudice, Lydia is 16 when she runs away with Wickham, and it's like a big deal that she is so young and she's really childish. And it's like, yeah, that's the same age as this character. Like, she's 17 years old. Like, I can't imagine any of the 17-year-olds I taught, let alone hung out with when I was a 17-year-old, having like a rational response to those things. And if you have that older authority figure telling you these are the right answers, and not only that, I can control how you behave. Like he makes such a big deal of like not sleeping in their room together and making her feel like it's her fault. I'm just like, it's so manipulative, and it would have been so easy for him to manipulate her because of her age and how she responds to him because he saved her, etc. Yeah, did not like Richard. Earring aside, like, I didn't like him anyway. I know that was a sticking point for you though.
Also, I don't remember if early on in the book they tell us how old he is, but in my mind, the whole time he was in like his mid to late 30s. I imagined him a lot older than her because of like that very manipulative aspect. And in my mind, it was very much like a very much older man controlling his very young bride. And then there's a character that she says, oh, he was probably only a few years younger than Richard, 21 or 22. And I was like, this man is in his mid 20s, but seems ancient.
Yeah, because that's the thing. So, like, for me, it doesn't make sense for him to be anything less than his 30s, because men didn't get married until later anyway, because they had to earn their fortune before they could get married, because they had to have something to contribute. They would have to take care of not only their family, but their wife's family as well. So, like, and that was interesting. The fact that he'd been really stinging on her mum, I thought that was really interesting. And then she's like, you need to provide this for my mum, whatever. And he's like, okay, done. Are we going home now? Like you weren't doing that. Don't act like it's the easiest thing in the world to do, because that makes you look like a shittier person that I have to tell you she needs more than the bare minimum. Like, we have so much and you give her this. Like, no, he was a bad person. But it's interesting that of all the things that we've discussed, that's the thing that I feel most passionate about. Like, not the witch trials and not like her story, but like the dynamic between her and her shitty husband.
I
Interesting.
am not at all surprised that the thing you're most passionate about is the shitty men in this book.
Oh, because you've met me. Yeah, I forget this. I can't remember if it was. I mean, I had several people. I know you were on the list. Comment on that vlog that I did, where I was like, "Patriarchy is the reason I'm running late," and like that has become like my catchphrase now. It's like, it's the patriarchy's fault. That's why I'm late. But
We love it.
thank you. Should we open it up to any questions from people watching? And
Yeah.
we'll do like a little Q&A bit. And then after that, if you want, we can do like a little intro to the Library of the Unwritten. And I'll read the synopsis because I haven't read it in a while and I can't really remember what it's about. I vaguely remember that it's about a library full of demonic books, but
Yeah. And you can do an intro because I remember nothing and I don't have the book physically with me.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know where I've put it. I started it and then I've put it down and I don't know where I've put it down. So that's fine. But yeah, so if anyone has any comments or questions about the familiars, let me know. I'm just going to check the Discord because I think I did put a thing. I don't know if someone asked a question on there the other day. I think I took a screenshot of it, but I can't find it. So just going to do that. Right, wrong one. There we go. Just waiting to see if anything comes through. So Ali put that it was making her feel anxious reading it, which I think is really interesting because that's, I think, the mystery element to it. But no, I think I've lost the question and it wasn't on the spoiler-free bit, which is annoying.
I felt very, very calm the whole time I was reading it. And I don't know if it's because I didn't like anyone, so I didn't care about what was happening to them.
Possibly. Like, that's fair enough. If you're like, no, I'm not invested in this at all, then I think that's fair. That's fair. I definitely felt like it's interesting because I definitely enjoyed it when I was reading it. The more I've discussed it, the more I found issues with it, but I still think it's on that like 3.5 thing for me. So Lizzie has asked, do you know any of the real historical background of the Pendle witch trials before you picked up the book? I didn't know about the Pendle witch trials. I know about the witch trials in general, but I tend to find that a lot of the witch trial stuff I know about is either Salem related or Canterbury related, because we have like Canterbury's half an hour away from where I am, and there's still a ducking stool there. Like they maintain it from like I think it's a replica, but they maintain a replica there, which is really interesting. And there's a lot of like witch lore around Canterbury, so I know that stuff, but I didn't know anything about the Pendle witches. But what's really interesting is I read A Kind of Spark, and I think they talk about something very, very similar. For them, it's in Scotland, but they look at like homeland witch trials. So I find that fascinating because a lot of my experience is US witch trials. But what about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I studied the Crucible at school, so also knew a lot about the Salem witch trials, but not. I had only heard of the Pendle witch trials because there is a paranormal investigator YouTuber that we watch.
Amazing.
And he's terrible, but he's done a couple of videos on like where he's gone to Pendle Hill, and spoken about it a bit. But I mean, I wouldn't exactly call his videos educational. So like, I knew that there had been witch trials there, but I didn't really know anything about them.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I'll see if any more questions come through. But yeah, no, that's fair enough. Do you have any other like witchy books on your TBR or books that you are like on your radar that you want to read?
I really wanted to read Year of the Witchling.
Mm-hmm. Witching, yeah.
Have you read that?
I'm currently reading it. I'm
Are,
about 30 pages in.
are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I am. Why?
Because I remember watching someone's vlog. I want to say it was Becca, and I remember watching someone reading it and them being disappointed by it. But then I also remember watching someone read it and them really, really liking it. So I'm kind of, when I heard about it, I was really keen. But then, kind of, the more reviews I saw, the less keen I started getting. But I think I'm still borderline interested. But also, I'm very much keen for some witchy book recommendations because I love witchy books, but I feel like I never encounter them.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah, so I've been avoiding the Year of the Witching vlogs because Ashley gifted it for me for Christmas. So I've like actively avoided watching them since then because I want to read it first and then watch them. Usually I don't mind about spoilers, but for this one I was kind of like I don't want to go in and then find myself nitpicking it as I go because I've seen. And I think Becca doesn't really like historical fiction. So I think that would have been an issue, whereas I quite like historical fiction, so it wouldn't have been an issue for me. I'm quite enjoying it. I really like the style of writing, and again, like I said, with having the perspective of quite a negative character, the main character is not a nice person, and she can't really stand the people that she's around. So I quite like characters like that, because I find it really fascinating when you've got like an outcast character. They're an outcast for two reasons. Either they've chosen to be an outcast because they can't like stand everyone else, or everyone can't stand them, and there is something about them that is strange or other. And we're getting a lot more stories where it's group A, not group B, because it's very, very easy to write a story where everyone hates a particular person for a particular thing, because then you can lean into stereotypes and things like that. But having it be where it's a narrative where they dislike themselves and others, that's always more fascinating to me, because there's always a lot more conflict in that. I haven't really got to like the main conflict of the story yet, but the opening descriptions and things like that are really, really good and really, really fascinating in the way that this whole thing works. And especially because like their society is really weird in the fact that a man can have multiple wives, and his wives can all be like very, very young, and he can be like 60. And it's weird, and like it's very visceral in the way that it's written. I think you'd really enjoy it. I think it's really gross, and you'd really enjoy it.
I I mean, this is the wonderful thing about working in a bookstore, is I just get to order whatever I want to read. So I will order it this week.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we can buddy read it because I've barely started, so we can do that as well.
Okay.
But it doesn't look like we're going to have any more questions because it's been sat there for about 10 minutes. So I will take the banner off. And I thought I'll just do like a little intro to the book that we're reading next, which is The Library of the Unwritten. Actually, let's put the link in the chat. I have a copy available via Waypoint, which is my business. And because I'm a co-host, I've got a discount code for the book club book as well, which is cool. Let me just find that. If I'd been smart, I'd have prepped this earlier, but I'm not smart, so I'm doing it now. There it is. So there's the link, and then the code is below. So, Library of the Unwritten. In the first book of the brilliant new fantasy series, books that aren't finished by their authors reside in the Library of the Unwritten in Hell, and it is up to the librarian to track down any restless characters who emerge from those unfinished books. Many years ago, Claire was named head librarian of the Unwritten Wing, a neutral space in Hell where all the stories unfinished by the authors reside. Her job consists mainly of repairing and organising books, but also of keeping an eye on restless stories that risk materialising as characters are escaping the library. When a hero escapes from his book and goes on the search of his author, Claire must track and capture him with the help of the former muse and current assistant Brevity and nervous demon courier Leto. But what should have been a simple retrieval goes horrifyingly wrong when the terrifyingly angelic Ramiel attacks them, convinced that they hold the Devil's Bible. The text of the Devil's Bible is a powerful weapon in the power struggle between heaven and hell. So it falls to the librarians to find the book with the power to reshape the boundaries of heaven and hell and earth. So book shenanigans, lots and lots of book shenanigans, demons versus angels. I'm intrigued. It sounds really good, but it also sounds like it could be very tropey. So we shall see.
I mean, I don't mind a good trope. I can deal with things being horrifyingly cliched. As long as I'm having fun, I'm like I can throw all of my objectivity out the window.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I think it's going to be interesting with this one because I think I'm going into it expecting to enjoy it more, but I don't expect the writing to be of the caliber of the Familiars, but I'm expecting to enjoy it more, if that makes sense. So yeah. I think it could still come out as like a 3.5 or a 4, but for different reasons.
I'm trying not to put expectations on things, because more and more I'm finding that that's what's causing my disappointing reads. Like, a 3-star book shouldn't be a disappointment. A 3-star book should be something that I've enjoyed. But more and more I'm finding that, like, my 3-star reads are like, I was expecting them to be a 4 or 5-star. So then I can't just enjoy it for what it is, because it's not as good as I wanted it to be. So I'm trying not to put expectations on things, but also, like, I'm very much expecting this to be at least a 4-star read.
Yeah, for me, a 3-star it's not something I would have normally picked up, and it was okay. Like, I enjoyed it, but I'm not like running out to tell people about it. A 4-star is, yeah, I'm happy to recommend this. I think there's a lot going for it. I either liked the writing style or I enjoyed it, or both. And a 5 is usually, it made me cry, so therefore it got an immediate 5, because if you can make me feel something, you deserve 5 stars, you know? So that's how mine works anyway. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or shall we bring this live to a very neat conclusion?
I don't think so. I think I'm pretty done.
Cool. Okay. Well, it has been really nice chatting to you about the Familiars, and I guess we'll do this again next month. Are you going to be brave enough to host it on your channel, or do you want me to host it again?
I can host it on my channel.
I'm proud of you. We're gonna smash it. It's gonna be great. So I will see everyone else later, I guess. Then. So what were you gonna say?
One of my goals for this year was to do a live every month, and I've done one.
Okay, so you took a break and now you're back on it. You can do it for like one a month for the rest of the year. I'm here for it. I'll turn up to all of them. You know I will. Cool. Okay, well, I will leave it there then. And I hope everyone else enjoyed the Familiars, and I will see you next time, whenever that is. I don't know when that'll be, but next time.